Hey, Rainy Joe here, and welcome back to the channel where today we are going to be doing another vinyl haul. We have not done one since January of this year. I believe that was when I last did one towards the end of the month. And today we're going to be covering all the albums I have got since then. My birthday records. I had my birthday in February. Turned the ripe age of 26, for those who may be wondering. And I also went to a record show just recently. So with that in mind, I've got a good heavy stack of about 15 records right in front of me. And we're going to go through them one by one. I will talk about each one. I will talk about how great the albums are, of course. And I will, of course, maybe share my experience with some of them at the record show when I get to that pile. Let's get into it today with the first record. This is actually a record that I had received at Christmas. But it didn't come in the mail until the end of the month after I filmed my vinyl haul video. My girlfriend got me this record. She pre-ordered it for me. I wanted it very much so. That being the wonderfully brilliant, my second favorite album of last year, possibly even my number one at this point. That being Cameron Winter's Heavy Metal. This is a brilliant record, a fantastic singer-songwriter LP that feels like it is in the same vein of Leonard Cohen. For example, if you like Leonard Cohen, definitely check out Cameron Winter. He's an incredible vocalist, an incredible player of many instruments. And when making this record, I have read that he got a lot of artists, I believe off of Craigslist, to help perform some of the music. It is a very interesting, almost DIY type project from somebody who is the frontman of a fantastic band, that band being Geese. But this is his first solo record. And if you like Leonard Cohen, you like singer-songwriter music, you like music that is depressive but kind of indie in tone, check out Heavy Metal. This is fantastic. It is a must listen, in my opinion. Real quick, I will show it is just a kind of silvery metal variant. And also, to avoid any confusion, the record is called Heavy Metal. But it's not heavy metal music. It's very soft, indie, beautiful singer-songwriter music at the end of the day, with no metal whatsoever in its DNA. But then we go into our birthday records, because not long after, in February, my birthday had arrived, and with that, I got a few records. We'll talk about these first two here. I got these from my mom. We'll talk about this one first. That, of course, being the wonderfully iconic Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. Fun fact for you, I used to not like Stevie Wonder at all. I didn't like his voice. I didn't like his music. I was not a fan of any of his work. I don't know why, but it took me a while to really enjoy him. And now I think he is a genius, especially within the soul genre. I don't think this is the greatest album of all time like I've seen people herald it as, but I do think it is one of the best soul albums ever. It's a double LP. You probably already know it. It's got some classics on here. Sir Duke, of course, is brilliant. But if you really want to know my honest opinion, the best track on here is Joy Inside My Tears. I think that is the most underrated and best track here. It's fantastic. It's got a nice slow building, gradual build to it that feels very soulful and beautiful. But this whole record, I mean, I Wish is on here. Love's in Need of Love Today kicks things off great. This is beautiful. Contusion, of course, is like a soul, jazz, funk, jazz rock, just masterpiece in my opinion. Feels like it fell out of the Mario Kart soundtrack, but in a good way. It's brilliant. Check out this record. Seriously, if you for some reason haven't, this is a must-listen-to soul record. Stevie Wonder, the man, the myth, the legend. And with that, my mom also gave me another soul record that many would consider. I haven't even opened this one up yet. Yikes, I should. Many would consider this the best soul album of all time. I've seen this labeled as the best album of all time. And this one I actually think is better. If I'm being honest with you, I would pick this over Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life for the best soul album and one of the best albums ever. That, of course, being What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. This thing flies by. What a breeze of an LP. But not at all a breeze in terms of topic and content. This is jam-packed with some political aware commentary, very much relevant today, still very relevant today, but also relevant to the time it came out, which is unfortunate in many ways. Kind of shows that we haven't really worked past a lot of the issues that plagued this time, and still to this day are an issue, which is kind of depressing in a sense. But this one here is just beautiful. It's got some really beautiful kind of production on it. Very soft, very soulful, very Motown-esque. In every track, also kind of segueing from one track to the next, makes this feel like a singular project that just flies on by. Not too much to say. Gone too soon. Marvin Gaye, a legend, of course. And What's Going On is his masterpiece, and is certainly worthy, I would say, of one of the greatest albums of all time. If I see this on a list of the best albums ever, I don't disagree, is what I'm saying. Brilliant. Love it. Reacted on the channel to it, as well as the Stevie Wonder last year for Soul September. If you haven't seen those, go check those out. That was the first time I ever heard both those records. And pretty solid videos, I would say. But I am a little biased. But continuing on, we have a record that is not soulful, although this artist has covered, in a sense, the kind of soul genre, has kind of hinted at it in his previous LPs. But this is a hip-hop musician, and that, of course, is Kendrick Lamar with GNX. This record has no soul on it, I should say. I mean, it's soulful in the way that Soulful Man is a part of it, but it's not a soul record. It is a hard-hitting kind of LA rap album that carries on a lot of the roots of LA culture throughout. This is a very mixed album to a lot of people. Some people love this, say it's one of Kendrick's best, and I have seen this considered one of Kendrick's worst. But if you ask me, it's in his top 3, top 4. I would put it above Damn, personally. I think it is a really hard-hitting, banger-filled LP with some really great production that is rough around the edges, but kind of cuts through very deep with its kind of energy and its momentum. And with that, I've got nothing against it. I think the worst thing about it is the title track. I'm not a huge fan of GNX, the title track. I think it's quite of a bloated track with all the features on it. But Kendrick's energy on this thing, I feel like it hones in on Tupac, of course, his biggest idol, and DMX as well, which is the fiery energy that he brings to the mic on this LP. An energy that I feel like we don't get from Kendrick too often, especially in such great lengths of a full LP. So, Kendrick Lamar, GNX. The next 11 records, I believe it is, are all the ones that I got over the weekend at the record show I went to, where, I'll go over these records, kind of how I found them and how that experience went. But I love going to the record show and dropping a fair amount. I usually save up for a little bit of a good spree of records, because that's the best way I feel like to get the bang for your buck. Because record shows, you could get a good discount. You could haggle a little bit. And I did do a little bit of haggling here when I could. And with that, I got some fantastic records. The last Vinyl Haul video, I talked about the record show I went to before then. And right off the bat, I found some records right away. But this took me a while. I was in the record show, doing the rounds, looking in different bins, checking out different vendors, seeing different people. And I could not find any albums that I felt the need to have. Even though I had a list on my phone, I really was seeking out some specific artists, especially Scott Walker, Nick Drake, Gil Scott-Heron, of course, I wanted to find. And with that in mind, I could not find any of those. I was having a tough time asking every vendor for them. But as I was, perusing through the shop, I found a good copy for $25. Talk Talk, Color of Spring. This is a really great, I guess you'd call it art pop, but just pop LP from the 80s before Talk Talk went full post-rock. But I find the music on here is very easy listening, very breezy, very beautiful, has some great synth work throughout from what I remember. And the final track on here, Time, It's Time, has a nice kind of growing, almost post-rock energy to it that I feel like the DNA of carried on to their next couple of records, but in a much more darker, slower, more calculated tone, I guess you could say. But, I thought this was a must-have record. I love the cover art. I think it is absolutely gorgeous and probably the best cover art of the Talk Talk discography. And just a good spring record, I guess you would say. I mean, it's called Color of Spring. But $25, not too bad. I did see this at a few other vendors before I purchased this one, and they were all selling it for like 40, 45, I think 35 I saw. And I wasn't wanting to drop that much on this record. I do enjoy it, but it's not my favorite record or anything like that. It's just one that I know I will play on occasion. So I thought, for $25, I might as well go ahead and get this copy right here. But that was the first LP I found. And then I continued on, and I continued my journey of asking for more Scott Walker. Does anyone have Scott Walker? Does anyone have Nick Drake? Still, no and no and no across the board. Breaking my heart. But in that perusing, I went to a table and found for only $10, because again, I saw this record for a good like $30, and I've never actually listened to this album that I'm about to present. But for $10, I thought, why not? I'm talking about Stevie Wonder's The Secret Life of Plants. It's kind of hard to get on camera. But Secret Life of Plants is a record that I think most Stevie Wonder fans were confused by. I've heard it's kind of weird, experimental, quite out there. I've never listened to this thing in full. I've kind of skimmed it a little bit. And I thought, one day perhaps I will listen to this thing in full and maybe do a video on it. I've kind of wanted to do a series where I talk about albums that are a little bit left field for a kind of mainstay musician who's been around for a while, to do something a little out there. And I thought if I were to do a series like that, this would be one I would cover, because I've heard it is quite weird, quite bizarre, and very mixed in terms of the reception. Some people seem to love it, and some people say it is the worst thing Stevie Wonder did. I thought, why not though? For only $10, I also just think the cover is pretty nice if it's picking it up there. It's pretty clean. Then I continued on. The $10 purchase there was just a light purchase. The next table, however, was not as light of a purchase. This one hurt me a little bit more, I will say. The next table, the guy was a little bit steeper for prices, but these two copies I got of the next two records were sealed. So I'll give him that. They are sealed records. They are not ever played. They're not previously owned. So these are essentially as if I went to a record shop and just bought them. But the guy was super knowledgeable. I believe he came from England. And we talked a little bit about music, and I I said, hey, you got any Scott Walker? You got any Gil Scott-Heron? Which he did, but he already sold his copy online. He couldn't give it to me, which was unfortunate. It was Pieces of a Man I really was seeking out. But that's okay. He sold it to someone that was quicker than me. The early bird gets the worm, they say. But he did have a copy of a record that I felt was necessary to get. And was on my list of records to look out for. And that is Frank Zappa's Hot Rats, as it's performed by Captain Beefheart in the second song. He says that. But this is a really great jazz rock, jazz fusion record that flies by, has a really great energy throughout. Willie the Pimp is a brilliant track. Like I said, that's the one where it drops the title within the track, within the lyrics by Mr. Captain Beefheart. And really, the playing on this thing is fantastic, especially the violin, I believe, throughout this thing is brilliant. I don't remember the name of the musician who does that. I think it says it right here. Let me check real quick. Ian Underwood. I was going to say Underwood. Ian Underwood did the piano, the flute, all clarinets, all saxes, and the organist maximus, which I guess is a type of organ. But the flute playing and the clarinets and the violin are done to a stellar degree. Incredible. Ian Underwood is, to me, the star of this LP, which is saying a lot considering Frank Zappa is a brilliant musician, obviously on his own, and Captain Beefheart is on here. But with Ian Underwood doing his thing with the violin, doing his thing with the flute, he really takes the stage throughout these tracks and takes them into a direction where he solos out of control and really just kind of guides the music in a way. Obviously under Zappa's guidance, but still incredible jazz rock, jazz fusion record, covered last year in Jazz July. If that sounds interesting, you go check out my reaction. Loved it when I heard it. Love it still today. Still playing it. Still giving Willie the Pimp many plays, especially. Absolutely a necessary jazz rock record. But $45 for this was a little steep. I mean, that's pretty much, in my area, at least in my country, a pretty standard price for a lot of records, at a record store at least. But like I said, as I was, at this table, I got 2 records. I got a Hot Rats and another one I'm holding in my hands. And this record, I am perhaps one of the most excited about to talk about because, like I said, I was going to each table and saying, do you have any Gil Scott-Heron? Do you have any Scott Walker? I was getting no's across the board. Someone said they had the Walker Brothers. And, nothing against the Walker Brothers, but I wanted Scott Walker. Still didn't get any. I will tell you now for the rest of this video, there is no Scott Walker, unfortunately. But I did say I was also looking for Nick Drake. And as I spoke to this English fella about music and whatnot, I said, do you have any Nick Drake? And he said, now we're talking. He had all 3 LPs from Nick Drake. I, of course, already own Nick Drake's opus, the timeless classic Pink Moon. However, I don't own the record here, which is 5 Leaves Left by Nick Drake. This is the first LP of only 3 records that he had done in his lifetime. Unfortunately, took his life after Pink Moon. Very tragic, very sad. The fact that considering he kind of, I guess, died a failure, at least in his eyes. He was not a failure, I would say, by time standard. Now he's considered a legend 50 years later. But in his time, he was a failure in his eyes, even though the music he was creating was generational, beautiful, poetic, gorgeous, timeless. And 5 Leaves Left is the first of 3 LPs and is already an incredible start to a career because this thing is fantastic. It is less sparse than Pink Moon. There's more instrumentation on it, more strings, I believe, more piano work as well. But it's fantastic. I love Time Has Told Me kicks things off with a really great track. And it's also quite a short LP. A lot of strings on here, though. Cello, bass. There's congas on here as well, I guess. I don't remember that. But my point is, this is a must-listen-to record. And as I was talking to the fella selling this for $42, he was saying how Nick Drake is a musician's musician, that people who really are into music or admire musicians or are a musician themselves will enjoy Nick Drake. And I agreed because I'm a huge fan of music, as you know, on this channel. And for somebody who thinks music is kind of the main purpose in life, I feel like Nick Drake captured it in essence. Thinking about Nick Drake does kind of bum me out every time I put him on, but I guess that's the mood to go for. But for $42, the other one was, I think, $47 or $45, I think it was. I was able to work it down to $80 for the 2, so I saved about $7. Then after that, I was, I felt kind of bad about spending that hefty sum, and I was like, okay, we need to go a little cheaper. We need to find a table selling at deep or better prices, that's for sure. So I went back around to the front and found a lot of used records from this one table where they were selling quite cheap, and I had not realized that the front table was the place to be because we got Jethro Tull's Aqua Lung, incredible title track off here. That's the only track I know is Aqua Lung, to be honest. I've never listened to this album in full. I briefly dated a girl who told me that this was her favorite album of all time, so I got to give this a listen because, if it is, considered one of the best albums of all time, I got to hear it. And it is a prog rock album, I believe. I don't know. I've never listened to too much Jethro Tull. That needs to change. And Aqua Lung is the place to start, I think, considering that title track is a masterpiece and one I've listened to many, 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 many times. So I should just give the whole album a listen. And I thought, for only $10, how can you go wrong? Another one for only $10 is an album I just listened to in full recently, not on the main channel. Just did this in my own private time. One of the greatest musicians ever, in my opinion, a genius, I would say a visionary, a top 5 musician ever, is Paul McCartney. A bit of a boring pick maybe, but Paul McCartney, the guy is a legend, not just for what he did with the Beatles, but for what he did with the solo career and for what he did with Wings. He is, in my opinion, a whimsical sort of visionary when it comes to music. He has a lot of fun kind of just instilled into the DNA of his sound. And when he's at his most whimsical, he's at his creative best, in my opinion, which can be seen like on Abbey Road. I love Maxwell Silverhammer. I don't care what anyone says. But the album I'm talking about right now that I just recently listened to in full and I've been giving multiple listens to is Band on the Run by Wings. The first time I ever heard this was about a week ago, and I have given it many more spins. This was also only $10, and I actually love this whole thing. I think there are plenty of great tracks. Of course, Band on the Run is an iconic opening track, a great title track, has that classic sort of medley style that Paul pulls off so well on tracks like, Uncle Albert, for example, or on a lot of the work he did with the Beatles, like on the second half of Abbey Road, that whole medley. But Band on the Run, you've got the title track. You've got Bluebird, I think is fantastic. Let Me Roll It has that sick guitar lick throughout, very sluggish in sound. Love Mamunya, really good chanting sort of track. And Picasso's Last Words, Drink to Me, is a really sweet, cute, lovely track that still has that sense of whimsy that I love about Paul. So this was a must get. I do think the song Jet, the second track on here, is I think the second most popular track on this album. I don't really like the song Jet. Every time I hear it, I'm actually kind of put off by it. I don't like the chant, the scream of Jet. Don't like that. But that's okay. This is a great record, though. Following in that same suit, I needed to get this record, Paul McCartney's Ram. This is better than Band on the Run. I'll say that right off the bat. And this is one of the best Paul McCartney records, even including the Beatles work. I would put this up there with some of the best Beatles. Like, it is, in my opinion, that good. It carries on that sense of whimsy that Paul is so good at throughout its entire runtime. You feel like you are in a nice country scene. You are out on a farm. You're working hard under the sun, but you're having a good time. Of course, Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey is on here. A great, just beautiful medley that is a must listen. But it's very sweet. I love Heart of the Country on here. It's a very cute track. You've got Backseat of the Car to close things out. Long-Haired Lady as well with Linda singing. Not the best vocalist, but I think she kind of brings out a lot of the, again, very goofy, fun, silly energy that Paul is great with. She kind of brings that out in the music. And Ram is just the peak of that style. I know at the time it was panned, but now it has a critical resurgence, as it should, because I don't know if you could really find a more joyful record from the 70s. And there's a lot of joyful records from then. But there's just a primal sort of DNA that Paul has, I think, with his music. I love the guy. I really do. I'm going to be heartbroken when he passes. The guy's getting up there in age, but he's a legend for everything he's done for music. And Ram is timeless. Like I've been saying throughout this video, a lot of timeless records. Ram is just one of many. The next record is one that has a cover that I'm not used to, but this album is underrated. I covered this earlier in my channel's lifespan, I guess you would say, when I was doing the 1001 album series, where I was trying to listen to every album in the 1001 albums to listen to before you die book. Something I have, of course, not done for years. Maybe I'll go back to it one day. I don't know. But that's not what this is about. Instead, I'm talking about an underrated, great 80s, kind of like, I guess you call it English pop, jingle pop. Is that what they call it? Jangle pop? Is that the name? Almost like the Smiths adjacent. And a very underrated album with some great songwriting, in my opinion. Lloyd Cole and the Commotion's Rattlesnakes. What a poll. If someone told me that one of their favorite albums or one of their favorite 80s albums was Rattlesnakes, I would instantly respect them, because there's some really great tracks on here, especially the track list is on the front. Like, that's the thing. I don't think this is the official cover. And I asked the person selling it if this was like an alternate cover. They didn't know. I don't think they were familiar with the album, to be honest. But Perfect Skin kicks things off with Lloyd Cole's best work. Great songwriting, has a great energy. I love the charisma that Lloyd Cole kind of brings out. A really just great track to kick things off. But you also have Down on Mission Street is another great one you should check out. 2CV, Forest Fire, and Are You Ready to Be Heartbroken closes things out with this very potent, emotional track with a great I think it's a harmonica on it as well. There's a lot of pain in the track Are You Ready to Be Heartbroken? And it's almost like accepting the pain that'll come with, trying to date, trying to find a steady relationship. Are you prepared for the inevitable downfall? It's a very negative outlook on dating, I think. But in trying to find the one for you, trying to find your soulmate, as they say, are you ready to be heartbroken is the question that Lloyd Cole asks throughout the track. It's a really great track, and is on par with the opening track, Perfect Skin. I think those two tracks especially are must listens. So if you haven't heard of Lloyd Cole and the Commotions, search up right after this video, or right now, I don't care, search up Perfect Skin or Are You Ready to Be Heartbroken for some great 80s Smiths-like pop music, Lloyd Cole and the Commotions. And only $10 for that one. The next one, I have not heard this LP, is Tangerine Dream's Phaedra. I just know that they're very ambient in focus. I'm not going to talk too much about it. There's really nothing I know about this album, really. But somebody I know was at the record show. I showed him this, and he said, Tangerine Dream, that is a great record. You can't go wrong with anything they do. And he said, Phaedra, brilliant. So I said, all right, you know what? You sold me. That guy knows music as much as I know music. If not, maybe he knows prog rock. If I ever wanted prog rock, I'd go to this dude. But he knows Phaedra, and he said, get it. So I said, deal. As I was at this record show, things were quieting down. I had already spent a heavy amount, and I was like, okay, I know there was one record that I had looked at previously that I wanted to buy. And I was like, if I have any leftover money, I'll go back for it. I only had $25 left, and this record was $30. So I, of course, asked the guy, hey, all I have is $25. He didn't even hesitate. He said, you can have it for $25. That's a deal. I said, oh, that's nice. You don't always get that. Sometimes they try to haggle you a little bit. They say, oh, I'm pretty firm on that. But no, this guy said $25 deal. I said, okay. We shook hands, and he asked if I found any Scott Walker. I said no. He said, yeah, it's pretty unlikely, which breaks my heart. But which doesn't break my heart is the fact that for $25, I got Black Moses by Isaac Hayes. Isaac Hayes, one of the best soul musicians ever. We've been talking about soul legends throughout this video. I feel like that's the theme here. Timeless music as well. And Isaac Hayes is up there with Stevie Wonder and is up there with Marvin Gaye, in my opinion, and doesn't get enough recognition. People talk about Shaft, which is a great soundtrack, but Hot Buttered Soul and Black Moses are both incredible albums, and the cover of Long to Be Close to You by the Carpenters on here is an incredible cover that really showcases Isaac's talents for bringing out the best in an original song by covering it and putting his own kind of soulful, extended, jammy mix, because I think that track is 12 minutes, where, of course, the original Carpenters mix is about like a 3-minute song. So for a good 10 minutes, it's really extended. It's very soulful. There's a lot of angelic sort of backup vocals on it. It's very gospel infused. A beautiful track. And, with that, you also got like this whole, it's a double album. I'll throw up the picture. It opens up into a full, I guess, display of Isaac Hayes in a Moses-like position, almost Jesus-like. Incredible. A great album. Very cool. Love that I got this for $25. But that was everything for the record show, almost. Because as I was leaving, I had 4 quarters left. 4 quarters. That's $1. And I went to the $1 bin, and I found, kind of on topic with the last one, Carpenters. I love the Carpenters. Who doesn't like the Carpenters? That classic kind of soft rock, easy rock from the 70s. I feel like the Carpenters sort of, although to some people a little cheesy, a little campy, they captured it, in my opinion, in a perfect way that is very distinct and unique. And Karen Carpenter, gone too soon, great vocalist and also underrated drummer. She's a great drummer that only true fans of Carpenters know. But of course, Karen and Richard Carpenter are both great for what they did for soft rock music, and I feel like this one here, it's got a lot of covers, I think, on it, but I don't know much about it. But for only $1, it was in a cheap bin. I was like, why not? Why would I not get that? It does have Make It Easy on Yourself, which I know Scott Walker performed with the Walker Brothers, so we almost got the Scott Walker dream by extension of the Carpenters. So that does it for all the albums I got over the last few months. That's 15 records. Love all these albums. If you're unfamiliar with some of these albums or any of them sound interesting to you, go ahead and check them out because they deserve all the praise I had given them. And even the ones I haven't heard, I'm sure are fantastic. So I can't wait to give those a spin. But as always, my name is Randy Joe. I appreciate you watching. Go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and follow along with the channel if you like my content, you like my energy, or you like music, you know. Go ahead and subscribe. It would mean a lot. But as always, my name is Randy Joe. I appreciate you watching, and I'm signing off.